I still remember the exact moment my world shattered into a million pieces. There I sat at our family dinner table, the same table where my parents had repeatedly promised me that the company I built from nothing would one day be mine. 12 years of my life. 80-hour work weeks. Countless sacrifices. All for what? To hear my father casually mention that my sister Ella now owned 80% of my company, while I had been granted a measly 5% in recognition of my hard work. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. But instead of screaming or crying, I simply stood up, laughed, and said the 3 words that would change everything. Let Ella handle it. Growing up in Millville, Pennsylvania, I always felt like I was living in my sister's shadow. Our small town wasn't exactly a hub of opportunity, but our family owned Daniel's Hardware, a local store that had been struggling to stay afloat for as long as I could remember. My father, Jack, was a traditional businessman who believed in handshake deals and keeping things in the family. My mother, Diana, was his devoted partner in both life and business. And then there was my younger sister, Ella, the golden child. While I was practical and business-minded, Ella was the academic star. She got straight. As without trying won every debate competition and had colleges fighting over her by junior year of high school. I wasn't jealous exactly, but I noticed how my parents' eyes would light up when talking about Ella's achievements, while my own practical skills were taken for granted. "Lula, could you restock the paint section?" my dad would ask, not as a question, but an expectation. "Lula, help your father with the inventory," my mother would say, while simultaneously praising Ella for winning another academic award. I graduated from the state college with a business degree, nothing fancy but practical. Meanwhile, Ella was accepted to an Ivy League school on a partial scholarship. The day she left, my parents threw a huge party. When I moved back home after graduation, it was with a quiet welcome back and an immediate expectation that I would help in the family store. But I had bigger ideas. At 22, fresh out of college in 2011, I could see that local retail was changing. Amazon was dominating, and small businesses like ours were dying. Our store was nearly bankrupt, barely bringing in enough to cover the bills. "Dad," I said one evening after closing, "I have an idea to save the business." My father looked up from the account books, his face lined with worry. "We're listening," he said, though his tone suggested he'd heard plenty of ideas before. "We need to go online, but not just as another hardware store. We need to specialize. I've been researching, and there's a growing market for vintage home restoration supplies. People renovating old houses struggle to find authentic materials and fixtures. We already have some of that inventory, and we have connections with suppliers. We could become the place for restoration specialists." My mother looked skeptical. "Online, Jack barely uses email." "That's where I come in," I explained, excitement building as I laid out my vision. "I can build the website, manage the inventory, create the marketing. People are willing to pay premium prices for specialized products they can't find at Home Depot." My father sighed heavily. "Lula, we're nearly $200,000 in debt. We can't afford to invest in some internet scheme." "It won't cost much to start," I insisted. "I can build the website myself. We already have the inventory. We just need to reposition how we sell it." After hours of discussion, my parents reluctantly agreed. What did they have to lose? The business was failing anyway. But then my father said something that would shape the next 12 years of my life. "If you can turn this around, Lula, someday, this business will be yours. Your mother and I won't be around forever, and Ella has no interest in hardware. Save this business, and you're securing your own future." Those words lit a fire in me. Finally, a chance to prove myself. A chance to build something that would truly be mine. I threw myself into the work. I taught myself web design, SEO, digital marketing, inventory management systems, everything I needed to bring Daniel's Hardware into the 21st century. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. While friends from college were building careers or traveling, I was hunched over a computer learning to code our first website or on the phone with suppliers negotiating better terms. 6 months in, we launched Heritage Home Supply as the online arm of Daniel's Hardware. I focused on authentic period pieces for home restoration, Victorian doorknobs, craftsman-style fixtures, reclaimed wood flooring, and the specialized tools needed to work with them. I created detailed product descriptions, researched the history of architectural styles, and positioned us as experts, not just sellers. To my amazement and my parents' shock, orders started coming in. Small at first, but steady. By the end of the first year, our online sales had surpassed the brick-and-mortar store. By 18 months, we were actually turning a profit for the first time in years. My parents seemed pleased, if somewhat bewildered by the transformation. "You were right, Lula," my father admitted, as we reviewed the quarterly numbers. "This online thing is working." I beamed with pride. "This is just the beginning, Dad. Wait until you see what I have planned next." In May of 2013, I was nominated for a local Business Innovation Award. The ceremony was held at the Millville Chamber of Commerce, a modest affair with rubber chicken and cheap wine, but it was my first public recognition. My parents attended, dressed in their Sunday best. When my name was called for Most Innovative Small Business Transformation, I almost floated to the podium. This was validation, proof that my vision and hard work were paying off. As I thanked the chamber, I glanced at my parents, expecting to see pride in their faces. I'd also like to thank my parents, Jack and Diana Daniels, for trusting me with their legacy, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But when the host asked my father to say a few words about the business transformation, what he said sent a chill through me. "We're so proud of the family effort that's gone into modernizing our store," he said, his arm around my mother. The Daniels family has always believed in adapting with the times, and this online expansion is just another example of our family's commitment to serving Millville. Family effort. I had done every bit of the work myself. My parents had barely learned how to check the online orders, but I pushed aside my disappointment. This was just the beginning, after all. There would be plenty of time for recognition later. What I didn't realize was that this moment foreshadowed years of underappreciation to come. But in that moment, I still had hope. Hope that I was finally building something meaningful. Hope that I was creating my future. Hope that my parents would eventually see and value what I was doing. I had no idea how badly that hope would be betrayed. The next 5 years were a blur of 18-hour days, constant innovation and explosive growth. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a failing hardware store was now a thriving e-commerce business that was rapidly outgrowing our small town. By 2015, Heritage Home Supply had become our primary business, with the original hardware store serving more as a showroom for our restoration products than a traditional retail space. I convinced my parents to lease a small warehouse on the edge of town to handle our growing inventory and shipping demands. "We need to focus on scaling efficiently," I explained to my father as I showed him the lease agreement. "Our orders have tripled in the last year alone." "This is a big commitment, Lula," he warned, though he signed the paperwork. "Don't forget, this is still a family business. We're not some big corporation." "I know, Dad. That's why I'm working so hard. I'm building our family's legacy." I reminded him, thinking of his promise that the business would someday be mine. He patted my shoulder. "You're doing good work, sweetheart. All this will be yours someday." Those words fueled me through countless 16-hour days. I hired our first employees that year, carefully training each one to understand our unique position in the market. By 2016, we had 15 full-time staff members, and our annual revenue had crossed $2 million. One of my most successful initiatives was creating a YouTube channel focusing on home restoration techniques. I wasn't naturally comfortable on camera, but I forced myself to learn. Every Sunday night, I would film tutorials on topics like how to restore Victorian crown molding or authentic techniques for refinishing hardwood floors. The channel took off, driving significant traffic to our website and establishing Heritage Home Supply as an authority in the restoration community. Customers began to see us not just as a supplier, but as a partner in their renovation journeys. The video on restoring sash windows saved my 100-year-old farmhouse renovation, one customer wrote in an email that I printed and framed. "Your products and knowledge are unmatched." While I was building the business into a multi-million-dollar operation, my sister Ella was building her own career in New York. After graduating from law school, she landed a position at a prestigious corporate law firm. My parents spoke of her accomplishments with unabashed pride. Ella just closed a $50 million merger, my mother would announce during our increasingly rare family dinners. Her firm is so impressed with her. That's great, I would say, genuinely happy for my sister, but wondering why my own achievements seemed to generate less enthusiasm. "How's the hardware business?" Ella would ask during her holiday visits, clearly having little understanding of what Heritage Home Supply had become. "We're on track to do $8 million in sales this year," I would answer, only to watch her eyes glaze over with disinterest. "That's nice," she would reply before changing the subject. I didn't resent Ella. We had simply chosen different paths. But I did notice how my parents would beam with pride over her corporate success, while treating my business achievements as somehow expected or ordinary. By 2018, Heritage Home Supply had 3 physical locations across Pennsylvania and a robust online presence serving customers nationwide. Our annual revenue had surpassed $15 million and we employed 45 people. I had expanded our product offerings to include custom millwork specialty paints, formulated to match historical colors, and a consultation service for major restoration projects. My own life, meanwhile, was entirely consumed by the business. I lived in a small apartment above our original store, more for convenience than comfort. Dating was a distant memory. Friends had stopped calling years ago, tired of my constant cancellations. My world had narrowed to Heritage Home Supply and the family I was building it for. Despite our growth, I was still reinvesting almost every dollar back into the business. I drew a modest salary enough to live on, but nothing extravagant. The company's success wasn't about personal wealth for me. It was about creating something, lasting something that would be mine when my parents eventually retired. "You're building your future," my father would remind me, periodically reinforcing my belief that all this sacrifice was worthwhile. In the fall of 2019, I identified an opportunity to open a 4th location in a historic district in Philadelphia. The expansion would require a substantial business loan, but our financials were strong and I had run the numbers meticulously. "I'll need you to sign off on the loan application, Dad," I said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. He frowned. "Let me come with you to the meeting. I've known Bill at First National for 30 years. I thought nothing of it at the time. My father had always been involved in major financial decisions, even though I had been running the company's day-to-day operations for years. The meeting with the bank seemed to be going well until the loan officer pulled up our business records on his computer. "So, Mr. Daniels, as the sole owner of Heritage Home Supply, you'll be personally guaranteeing this loan?" the banker asked my father. I froze. Sole owner. There must be some mistake. I've been running this business for over 8 years. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The banker looked confused, glancing between my father and me. "According to our records, Jack Daniels is listed as the sole proprietor," he confirmed. "Is there another business entity I should be aware of?" My father cleared his throat. "It's just paperwork, Lula. Nothing to worry about." "Yes, Bill, I'll be guaranteeing the loan." I sat in stunned silence as they continued the meeting. How was it possible that after 8 years of transforming this business, I wasn't legally recognized as an owner? When we left the bank, I confronted my father in the parking lot. "Dad, why am I not on any of the business documents? I've built this company from the ground up." He sighed, looking suddenly older than his 63 years. "It's just easier this way for now, Lula. Less paperwork, fewer complications with taxes. It doesn't change anything about what we've discussed." "But it does change things," I insisted. "Legally, I have no claim to this business." "Don't be dramatic," he said, his tone dismissive. "You're my daughter. We don't need legal documents between family. When the time comes, everything will be handled properly." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I pushed my concerns aside and focused on what I did best, growing the business that I still believed would someday be mine. But a seed of doubt had been planted, one that would grow into something far more troubling than I could have imagined. As we approached the 10-year anniversary of my taking over the business, Heritage Home Supply was barely recognizable from the struggling hardware store it had once been. We now operated 3 thriving retail locations, a large warehouse and fulfillment center, and an e-commerce platform that generated over 70% of our revenue. Our YouTube channel had over 300,000 subscribers, and we'd been featured in several national home renovation magazines. I was proud of what I'd built, but the incident at the bank had left me uneasy. I decided it was time to formalize my position in the company. With a major expansion into custom millwork manufacturing on the horizon, I needed clarity about my ownership stake before making such a significant investment. I scheduled a meeting with my parents at their home, away from the bustle of the business. I came prepared with a presentation outlining my vision for the company's future and a proposed ownership structure that would give me controlling interest while preserving shares for them as founders. As we look toward the next phase of growth, I explained, pointing to my carefully prepared slides, it makes sense to formalize the ownership structure we've always discussed. I'm thinking 75% for me, with you two retaining 25% between you for as long as you want to be involved. My parents exchanged an odd look that sent a shiver down my spine. Honey, there's no rush to change anything, my mother said, reaching for her tea. The business is doing well as it is. But we're about to invest $2 million in manufacturing equipment, I pointed out. I need to know where we stand legally before committing to that. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Lula, your mother and I need to think about our retirement. We've put our life savings into this business. I understand that, I said, trying to keep my voice level. And you'll continue to receive profits from your shares. But we've always discussed that the business would eventually be mine. I've dedicated my entire adult life to it based on that understanding. My father stood up abruptly. I think we should table this discussion for now. Let's focus on the anniversary celebration instead. Every attempt I made to return to the topic was smoothly redirected by my mother. Have you ordered the catering yet? Should we invite the mayor? What about press coverage? I left their house that day with a gnawing sense of unease. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. A few days later, I stopped by their house to drop off some anniversary event proposals. They weren't home, but my mother had always told me to just come in and leave things on the desk when they were out. As I placed the folder on my father's desk in his home office, I noticed a bank statement partially visible beneath some papers. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But something compelled me to pull the statement out. It was from an account I didn't recognize in my parents' names. As I scanned the transactions, my blood ran cold. There were regular transfers from the Heritage Home Supply business account into this personal account, and then outgoing payments to a college fund for Samuel and Sarah Wilson, and to something called Secure Retirement Partners. Samuel and Sarah were Ella's twin children. My sister had married Thomas Wilson 5 years ago and had twins shortly after. And Secure Retirement Partners sounded very much like a retirement investment fund. With shaking hands, I took photos of the statement with my phone, then carefully replaced it exactly as I had found it. That night I could barely sleep. The next morning I drove straight to my parents' house, determined to get answers. They were having breakfast when I arrived, looking surprised to see me so early. Lula, is everything okay? My mother asked, concern in her voice. No, everything is not okay, I said, pulling out the photos I'd taken. I found this yesterday. You're taking money from the business and putting it into accounts for Ella's children and your retirement. Money that should be reinvested or used for the expansion. My father's face darkened. You had no right to go through my private papers. And you have no right to funnel company profits without my knowledge, I countered. I'm running this business. I should be involved in all financial decisions. It's still our business legally, my mother reminded me, her voice gentle but firm. And it's family money. We're just making sure everyone is taken care of. Everyone except me, apparently, I said bitterly. I've put 12 years of my life into this company based on your promise that it would be mine. Meanwhile, you're secretly diverting funds to Ella, who has never contributed a single day of work. That's not fair, Lula, my father said sternly. Ella has her own career, and those funds are for your niece and nephew's education. Would you deny them that? Of course not. But this should be a transparent business decision, not something done behind my back. And what about this retirement account? How much of the company's profits have gone into that? My mother reached for my hand, which I pulled away. Sweetheart, your father and I are getting older. We need security for our future. The business is doing well because of your hard work, yes, but it's still our family legacy. I left their house that day with more questions than answers. Their evasiveness about the finances and their reluctance to formalize my ownership were setting off alarm bells I could no longer ignore. The next day I met with Travis Moore, a friend from college who had become a business attorney. We had occasionally met for coffee over the years, though my busy schedule had made those meetings increasingly rare. I need your professional opinion, I told him, explaining the situation and showing him what documentation I had about the business. Travis reviewed everything carefully, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Lula, I hate to tell you this, but legally speaking, you have no ownership claim to Heritage Home Supply whatsoever, he said finally. Despite your years of work and your parents' verbal promises without formal documentation, you're essentially an employee who can be terminated at any time. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That can't be right. I've built this company from nothing. My blood, sweat, and tears are in every aspect of it. I understand, and morally, you absolutely deserve ownership. Travis agreed. But legally, your parents hold all the cards. They could sell the business tomorrow and keep every penny if they wanted to. They wouldn't do that, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't so sure anymore. Are you telling me you've been working for 12 years on a verbal promise? Travis asked incredulously. No written agreement at all. They're my parents, I said weakly. I trusted them. Travis sighed, running a hand through his hair. Family businesses can be the most complicated of all. Look, you have a few options. We could try to establish sweat equity, or an implied partnership, but those are uphill legal battles. Your best bet is to convince your parents to formalize your ownership now before things get any more complicated. I left Travis's office feeling shaken to my core. For 12 years I had built what I thought was my future. Now I was faced with the possibility that I had been building someone else's dream all along. And I was determined to find out exactly what my parents were planning. After my meeting with Travis, I knew I needed more information. I couldn't confront my parents again without understanding exactly what was happening with the business I'd built. So I began my investigation, careful to keep my concerns hidden from everyone at the company. First, I tried to access our complete financial records. As the person running day-to-day operations, I had always had access to operational accounts, but I discovered there were company accounts I couldn't view. Our accountant, Gordon Phillips, had been with my father for decades and was clearly loyal to him, not me. I'm sorry, Lula, Gordon said when I requested full access to all company financials. Your father has specific protocols about who can access certain accounts. I'd need his explicit authorization. That response only deepened my suspicions. What were they hiding? I installed financial tracking software on our main business systems, careful to make it appear as a routine security upgrade. Within days, I had evidence that my father was indeed making regular withdrawals from the business accounts, far exceeding any reasonable salary or dividend. When confronted, he waved away my concerns. It's for business expenses, Lula. There are aspects of running a company that you don't need to worry about. Like what I handle all our vendor relationships, all our staffing, all our inventory and marketing. What business expenses don't go through me? Financial planning, tax strategy, long-term positioning, he said vaguely. Trust me, it's all for the good of the company. But I no longer did trust him, and that realization broke my heart. Around this time, I noticed Ella was visiting our parents more frequently. She had always come home for major holidays, but suddenly she was in town every few weekends. More concerning, she and my parents would have hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. One Saturday afternoon, I dropped by my parents' house unexpectedly and overheard my father on the phone in his study. Yes, Ella, I think the transition plan looks good, he was saying. We just need to make sure everything continues running smoothly. Lula has done a remarkable job building the infrastructure. Yes, I agree. We should discuss the staffing details when you're here next weekend. Transition plan. Staffing details. My sister, who had shown zero interest in the business for years, was suddenly discussing its future with our father. I backed away before being discovered, my mind racing. What transition were they planning? And why was I, the person who actually ran the company, not part of these discussions? I began methodically documenting everything about the business that only I knew: our supplier relationships, the custom inventory system I'd developed, the marketing strategies that had built our brand. I made copies of important business records and stored them securely away from the office. I wasn't planning anything unethical, but I needed protection if my worst fears were realized. As the company's 10-year anniversary celebration approached, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Perhaps transition plan meant my parents were finally planning to formalize my ownership. Perhaps Ella was just helping with legal aspects given her corporate law background. But deep down I knew something was very wrong. My suspicions were confirmed when I received an unexpected phone call from Gordon Phillips one evening. Lula, I'm calling about the forecasts for next quarter. Now that the restructuring is complete, he began. What restructuring? I asked, my heart suddenly racing. There was a long pause on the line. Oh, I assumed. I thought you would have been involved in the corporate restructuring. Your father assured me you were aware. Gordon, what restructuring are you talking about? I demanded. I'm sorry, Lula, but I think I should let your father discuss this with you, he said, clearly uncomfortable. It's not my place to. Gordon, I run this company. If there's been a corporate restructuring, I need to know about it. The business has been incorporated with a new shareholder structure, he admitted reluctantly. But I really can't discuss the details with you without authorization from the majority owner. My blood ran cold. And who is the majority owner, Gordon? I'm sorry, Lula. I've already said too much. Please speak with your father. He hung up, leaving me, staring at my phone in disbelief. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but could no longer ignore. My parents hadn't just been avoiding formalizing my ownership. They had been actively planning to give control of the company to someone else all along. And given what I'd overheard about transition plans that someone was almost certainly Ella, the betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. 12 years of my life. My entire 20s and early 30s given to building a business I'd been promised would be mine. All those missed friendships, relationships, and opportunities outside work sacrificed for a future that had apparently never been intended for me. But I still needed confirmation. I needed to hear the truth from my parents directly before I decided what to do next. The opportunity came sooner than expected at what I had thought would be a routine Sunday family dinner. Sunday dinner had been a family tradition whenever Ella was in town, though these had become increasingly tense affairs for me as my suspicions grew. This particular Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house to find Ella's car already in the driveway along with another I didn't recognize. Inside, I found not just Ella but also her husband, Thomas, and their 6-year-old twins, Samuel and Sarah. This was unusual. Thomas typically stayed in New York with the children when Ella made her weekend visits. Aunt Lula, the twins, cried, running to hug me. Despite my concerns, I couldn't help but smile. I adored my niece and nephew, even if their presence tonight struck me as oddly ceremonial. "What a nice surprise," I said, hugging them back. "I didn't know you all were coming to dinner." "Last-minute decision," Thomas said, shaking my hand. Ella thought it would be good for the kids to see their grandparents and aunt. My mother was unusually flustered in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be a much more elaborate meal than our typical Sunday dinner. "Can I help with anything, Mom?" I offered. No, everything's under control," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Why don't you go join the others in the living room?" In the living room, my father was showing Thomas some photos from a recent fishing trip while Ella was strangely preoccupied with her phone. The atmosphere felt charged, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. When we finally sat down to eat, the conversation was awkward and stilted, until my father deliberately steered it toward business. "So, Lula, how are things at the store?" he asked. A question he rarely posed anymore since I provided regular reports. "We're on track for another record quarter," I answered cautiously. "The new product line of historically accurate paint colors has been particularly successful." "That's wonderful," my mother said too brightly. "Isn't that wonderful, Ella?" What followed was bizarre. Ella, who had never shown more than polite interest in Heritage Home Supply, began asking detailed questions about our operations' profit margins and staffing. "And your fulfillment center, how many square feet is it now?" she asked. "Do you think it has capacity for growth?" "Since when are you interested in warehouse logistics?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite my growing unease. "Oh, just trying to understand the family business better," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Halfway through the main course, my father clinked his glass with his fork, calling for everyone's attention. My stomach knotted with dread. Whatever was coming, I knew it wasn't good. "We have some exciting news to share," he announced, his eyes darting everywhere except to meet mine. "As you all know, Heritage Home Supply has become quite successful thanks in large part to Lula's hard work over the years." I waited, barely breathing. "Ella has been considering a change in her career path," he continued. "After 10 years at Wilson and Blackstone, she's ready for a new challenge. And we're thrilled to announce that she'll be joining the executive team at Heritage Home Supply." The room fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What position will Ella be taking?" I asked. My voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising in my chest. My father and Ella exchanged glances before he answered. "Ella will be stepping in as CEO. Her corporate experience and legal background make her ideally suited to lead the company into its next phase of growth." "And what about me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You'll continue making valuable contributions as COO," my mother interjected quickly. "No one knows the day-to-day operations better than you do, sweetie." I looked at Ella, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "This is sudden," I said carefully, "especially for someone with no experience in our industry." "Actually," Ella said, smoothing her napkin, I've been studying the restoration supply business quite thoroughly over the past year. Dad has been sending me monthly reports and consulting with me on major decisions. I may not have your hands-on experience, Lula, but I understand the business model. The betrayal was so complete it left me momentarily speechless. My father had been secretly grooming my sister to take over the company I had built, sending her information behind my back, consulting with her on decisions affecting the business I ran every day. I see, I managed to say. And when was this decided? My mother slid a folder across the table. We've had the attorneys prepare everything. Heritage Home Supply is now formally incorporated. We wanted to make sure everything was properly structured for the future. With numb fingers, I opened the folder to find incorporation papers showing the ownership structure of Heritage Home Supply Incorporated. Ella owned 80% of the shares. My parents owned 15% between them. And I, the person who had dedicated 12 years to building the company from nothing, had been granted a 5% stake in recognition of contributions to the business. I looked up from the papers, meeting my father's eyes. When was this decided? I repeated, my voice now hard. We've been planning this for several years, he admitted. Ella's legal background is simply better suited for leadership than your more hands-on approach. The corporate world requires a certain polish, Lula. Ella brings that to the table. Polish, I echoed in disbelief. I've built this company from a failing hardware store into a $15 million business. I've established relationships with suppliers, customers, and employees that are the backbone of our success. I've created every system, every process that makes this company work, and you think I lack polish. Now, Lula, don't be dramatic, my mother said. Nobody is saying you haven't contributed significantly. That's why you're getting 5% of the shares and keeping your position. 5%. After 12 years, my voice had risen despite my efforts to stay calm. And you never planned to tell me about any of this, did you? If I hadn't found those bank statements, if Gordon hadn't slipped up on the phone, you would have just presented this as a done deal, wouldn't you? My father's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I turned to Ella. And you were okay with this plan, taking over a business your sister built while you were building your career elsewhere. To her credit, Ella looked uncomfortable. I thought you knew, Lula. Dad assured me this was always the plan, that you understood. Your role was operational, not ownership. A laugh escaped me, bitter and hollow. So I misunderstood the meaning of, this business will be yours someday for 12 years. That's quite a misunderstanding. We meant the business would be your livelihood, my father said stiffly. Your job security, not that you would own it outright. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. They had used me. For 12 years, they had dangled the promise of ownership to keep me working for minimal compensation, pouring my heart and soul into building something I would never own. They had planned all along to hand control to Ella, whom they had always favored, while expecting me to continue doing the actual work of running the business. I looked around the table at my family, my parents avoiding my gaze, Ella uncomfortable but not refusing her unearned prize, Thomas clearly aware of the plan but saying nothing. Even the twins innocent in all this, but beneficiaries of the college fund being filled with money from my hard work. A strange calm settled over me. I stood up, my dinner barely touched. Let me make sure I understand correctly, I said, my voice eerily composed. You want me to continue running the daily operations of the company I built, but now as an employee of my sister, who has zero experience in this industry, but gets to own 80% of my life's work. Lula, don't be like this, my mother pleaded. We're family. We'll all work together. I laughed, then a genuine laugh that seemed to startle everyone at the table. I looked directly at Ella and said the words that would change everything. Let Ella handle it. With that, I walked out, leaving my stunned family at the dinner table, surrounded by the remnants of their celebration of my betrayal. I drove aimlessly after leaving my parents' house, my mind reeling from the magnitude of the betrayal. 12 years of my life built on a lie. Every time my father had said, "This will all be yours someday," he had been manipulating me to keep working for the family's benefit with no intention of ever giving me what I had earned. I checked into a hotel that night, ignoring the barrage of calls and texts from my family. I needed space to think, to plan my next move. One thing was certain: I would not simply accept the role they had decided for me. The next morning, instead of going to the main office as usual, I drove to our newest retail location in Allentown. I needed to talk to someone I could trust, someone with legal expertise who wasn't tied to my family. Travis was waiting for me at a coffee shop across from the store. I had called him the night before, giving him the barest outline of what had happened. His face showed concern as I slid into the booth across from him. "I'm guessing Sunday dinner didn't go well," he said, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. "You could say that." I filled him in on everything that had transpired, watching his expression shift from concern to outrage. "This is even worse than I anticipated," he said when I finished. "They deliberately kept you in the dark while setting up a corporate structure that effectively steals the business you built." "What are my options, legally speaking?" Travis sighed. "Honestly, not great. You could sue for sweat equity or implied partnership, but those cases are difficult to win, especially against family members who can claim verbal agreements were misunderstood. And litigation would take years, during which time they could run the business into the ground or sell it. So I have no recourse. The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm me." "I didn't say that," Travis replied, leaning forward. "You may not have legal ownership, but you have something potentially more valuable: knowledge and relationships. You built this business. You know the suppliers, the customers, the employees. You understand the systems and processes that make it work. Your parents and sister don't." A glimmer of understanding began to form in my mind. "You're suggesting I leverage what they can't take from me." "Exactly. They may own the company on paper, but without you, what do they really have? A name and some inventory. The real value of Heritage Home Supply is in the relationships and knowledge you've developed over 12 years. Over the next few hours, Travis and I developed a strategic plan. It wasn't about revenge, but about securing what I deserved after years of dedication. First, I needed to document everything. I spent the next 3 days meticulously cataloging every aspect of the business that resided solely in my head: supplier relationships, custom pricing arrangements, marketing strategies, inventory management systems I had customized, and the complex web of customer relationships I had nurtured. Next, I scheduled private conversations with key employees who were loyal to me personally. I didn't ask them to do anything unethical, but I was honest about the situation. I built this business with the understanding that it would eventually be mine. I told Maria, our logistics manager, who had been with me for 7 years. Instead, my parents have given 80% ownership to my sister, who has never worked here a day in her life. I'm evaluating my options, and I wanted you to hear it from me first." Maria was outraged on my behalf. "That's unbelievable, Lula. Everyone knows this business exists because of you. What can I do?" "Just keep doing your job," I assured her. "But if things change, I may be starting something new. I'd want good people with me." I had similar conversations with our head of marketing, our top sales representatives, and our inventory manager. Each expressed dismay at my situation and hinted at their willingness to follow me if I left. Meanwhile, I contacted our major suppliers, people I had worked with for years, building relationships based on trust and mutual benefit. "Frank, it's Lula," I said to the owner of our largest millwork supplier. "I wanted to let you know about some changes happening at Heritage Home Supply. The company has been restructured, and my sister will be taking over as CEO. I'll be staying on for now, but my role may change in the coming months." "Your sister?" "The lawyer from New York." Frank sounded confused. "What does she know about restoration supplies?" "That's a good question," I replied. "I just wanted you to be aware since we've worked together for so long." "Well, I appreciate the heads up, Lula. But you know our relationship is with you, not a corporate structure. You saved my business during the recession by paying on time when others couldn't. I don't forget things like that." Similar conversations with other suppliers yielded similar responses. Many expressed concern about continuing their special arrangements and custom production runs without me directly involved. I also reached out to several of our largest customers, restoration specialists, who relied on our expertise as much as our products. "Just wanted to give you advance notice of some organizational changes," I explained to Amanda, who restored historic homes in New England and ordered nearly $100,000 of materials from us annually. "My sister will be taking over as CEO. I'll still be involved, but the leadership structure is changing." "Will this affect our usual process?" Amanda asked cautiously. "We have 3 major projects starting in the spring that will need your personal touch on the custom orders." I hope not, but I wanted you to be aware, I said, careful not to make promises I might not be able to keep. While I was quietly preparing, Ella arrived at headquarters attempting to assert her new authority. Having spent her career in corporate law, she approached Heritage Home Supply as if it were a giant corporation rather than the specialized relationship-driven business I had built. She called an all-staff meeting her first day, announcing her new role and outlining her vision for the future in corporate jargon that fell flat with our team of restoration specialists and craftspeople. She spoke of streamlining operations, maximizing shareholder value, and corporate synergies terms that meant nothing in our industry. I sat silently during this meeting, watching the confused and concerned faces of the employees who had worked alongside me for years. They looked to me for reassurance, but I simply nodded politely, letting Ella continue digging herself deeper. Over the next 2 weeks, chaos ensued. Ella tried to implement new reporting structures and approval processes that bogged down our normally efficient operations. She questioned long-time supplier arrangements that she didn't understand. She suggested standardizing products that were valued specifically because they were custom and authentic. I did my job, nothing more and nothing less. When asked direct questions, I answered truthfully, but offered no additional guidance. I watched as orders began to back up, customer complaints increased, and employee frustration mounted. Meanwhile, my father was calling me daily, his tone shifting from commanding to concerned to nearly pleading. "Lula, you need to help Ella more with the transition," he insisted. "The business is suffering." "I'm doing exactly what you asked," I replied calmly. "I'm continuing as COO while Ella handles things as CEO. Isn't that the arrangement you wanted?" My mother tried a different approach, appealing to family loyalty. "Sweetheart, we're all in this together. The business is our family legacy." "A legacy you've made quite clear isn't mine," I responded. "I'm simply respecting the roles you've established." 3 weeks after the fateful Sunday dinner, I received an unexpected ally. Frank from our millwork supplier called to inform me he was canceling his exclusive contract with Heritage Home Supply. "I've tried working with your sister Lula, but she doesn't understand our business. She's trying to standardize custom work and demanding price concessions that would put me underwater. I can't continue like this." "I understand, Frank. I'm sorry it's come to this. You know," he added before hanging up, "if you were to start your own operation, I'd be happy to work exclusively with you. Just something to think about." Frank wasn't the only one. Other suppliers began making similar calls, and customers started taking their business elsewhere when orders were delayed or specifications were mishandled. Employees were updating their resumes and taking long lunches for appointments. The company I had built so carefully was beginning to unravel without my active guidance. 3.5 weeks after Ella took over, my parents and sister requested an emergency meeting at my parents' home. When I arrived, all three looked stressed and disheveled, a far cry from their triumphant demeanor at our last family dinner. "We need to talk about what's happening at the company," my father began without preamble. "What specifically concerns you?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Everything is falling apart," Ella exclaimed, her corporate composure cracking. "Orders are backed up, suppliers are threatening to cancel contracts, customers are complaining, and 3 employees gave notice yesterday." "That sounds challenging," I observed. "What do you think is causing these issues?" "Don't play games, Lula," my father snapped. "You know exactly what's happening. You're deliberately withholding your knowledge and letting the business suffer to spite us." "I'm doing my job exactly as outlined," I countered. "I'm handling operations while Ella, as CEO, makes the decisions. Isn't that what you wanted? For her to lead and me to follow?" Ella ran her hands through her hair in frustration. I didn't understand how complex the business is. The supplier relationships, the custom ordering processes, the inventory management, it's nothing like corporate law. I don't have the industry knowledge to make these decisions effectively. "That's exactly what I told you at dinner 3 weeks ago," I reminded them. "But you all decided my contributions were worth only 5% of the company I built." For the first time, my parents looked genuinely remorseful. My mother's eyes welled with tears. "We made a terrible mistake, Lula. We thought we were being fair to both our daughters, but we didn't truly value what you've built." "What do you want from me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We need you to take control again," my father admitted, "to fix what's breaking." I nodded slowly, then reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "I thought we might have this conversation eventually. I've prepared a proposal." I laid out the documents Travis had helped me prepare a complete restructuring of Heritage Home Supply with me as CEO and 70% owner. The remaining 30% would be split among my family members, with my parents receiving 15%, Ella 10%, and 5% set aside in trust for the twins' education. This is what I'm willing to accept, I said firmly. I'll rebuild what's been damaged and continue growing the company I created. Ella can return to corporate law where her skills are better suited. You'll all still benefit financially from the business through your shares, but the control will be mine, as it should have been all along. My father started to protest, but Ella cut him off. She's right, Dad. I'm not equipped to run this company. Lula built it, she understands it, and she deserves to own it. But we've already signed the incorporation papers, my mother pointed out weakly. Papers can be redrawn, I replied. Consider this your chance to correct a grave injustice before it's too late to save the business at all. To emphasize my point, I pulled out letters from our top 5 suppliers, all stating their intention to terminate their contracts within 30 days, along with similar communications from major customers planning to take their business elsewhere. Without me actively engaged and in control, Heritage Home Supply will be worth very little very soon, I said. 30% of a thriving company is worth far more than 80% of a failing one. My father looked at the documents, then at me, seeing me. Perhaps for the first time, not as his daughter who would do whatever he asked, but as the capable businesswoman I had become. You've outplayed us, he said. Finally, a note of reluctant respect in his voice. When did you become so strategic? I learned from watching you, I replied. 12 years of observation. The only difference is that I'm being transparent about what I want and what I deserve. After hours of discussion, my family agreed to my terms. Travis, who I had waiting on standby, came over with the necessary paperwork. By midnight, we had signed preliminary agreements to restructure the company with me as majority owner and CEO. As we concluded our negotiations, Ella approached me privately. I owe you an apology, Lula. I should have refused to be part of this. I knew it wasn't right, but I let Dad convince me it was the best thing for the family. Why did you agree to it? I asked, genuinely curious. You have a successful career of your own. She sighed. Honestly, I was burning out at the firm. Dad offered an easy escape with a ready-made, successful business. It was selfish and wrong, and I'm sorry. Her apology was unexpected but welcome. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tight knot of anger in my chest begin to loosen just slightly. The road to rebuilding trust would be long, but perhaps not impossible. As I drove home that night, I felt no triumph, only a weary relief that justice had finally prevailed. I had stood my ground and fought for what was rightfully mine. The company I had built would finally legally be mine. But more important than the legal victory was the personal one. I had discovered my own worth and refused to accept less than I deserved. That lesson was perhaps the most valuable outcome of this painful chapter in my life. The months following our agreement were challenging but transformative. Rebuilding what had been damaged during Ella's brief tenure took considerable effort, but having legal recognition of my ownership provided a new sense of purpose and energy. First, I had to repair relationships with suppliers who had begun to withdraw from Heritage Home Supply. Frank, my millwork supplier, an unexpected ally, was the first call I made after the papers were signed. The business is now legally mine, Frank, I told him. 70% ownership and full control as CEO. I hope we can continue our partnership. Well, it's about time those parents of yours saw sense, he replied gruffly. Of course we'll keep working together. I've already got some new designs I think your customers will love. Similar conversations with other suppliers helped stabilize our supply chain within weeks. Most were relieved to be dealing directly with me again and quickly renewed their contracts. Employees who had been updating their resumes breathed sighs of relief when I announced the new ownership structure at an all-staff meeting. Maria, my loyal logistics manager, actually cried. We were all ready to follow you if you left, she confided after the meeting. Nobody wanted to work for someone who hadn't earned their position. Customers returned when they heard I was back in charge, and many expressed their support for my new official role. We never doubted you'd come out on top, Lula Amanda, my historic restoration client told me. You built something too special to let someone else take it away. Rebuilding my relationship with my family was far more complicated than rebuilding business connections. The betrayal had cut deep, and trust doesn't mend as easily as contracts. My parents, to their credit, seemed genuinely remorseful once they understood the full impact of what they had tried to do. 2 months after our agreement, they asked me to dinner, just the three of us. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," my father said, looking older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "What we did to you was wrong. Not just the business arrangement, but the years of taking your contributions for granted while praising Ella's accomplishments." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "We didn't realize how much we were hurting you, sweetheart. We got so caught up in traditional ideas about what success looks like that we couldn't see the remarkable business leader you had become." "You broke my trust," I said simply. "For 12 years I believed in your promise that the business would be mine someday. I made life decisions based on that belief." "We know," my father acknowledged, "and we can't undo that harm, but we want to try to rebuild our relationship if you'll let us." I wasn't ready to forgive completely, but I was willing to start the process. "It will take time," I warned them, "and things will never be exactly the same between us." They nodded, accepting this reality. Over the following year, we began the slow work of rebuilding trust through family therapy sessions, honest conversations, and their consistent respect for my leadership of the company. My relationship with Ella evolved in unexpected ways. After returning to her law firm in New York, she called me with a surprising proposition. "I've been thinking about how I can make things right," she said. "What if I provided legal counsel for Heritage Home Supply? Not as an employee, but as outside counsel handling contracts and compliance. I'd charge a fair market rate, not family favors, and you'd be my client with all the professional respect that entails." The arrangement proved beneficial. Ella's legal expertise, properly channeled, helped strengthen the company's contracts and intellectual property protections. Our professional relationship slowly helped heal our personal one as we learned to respect each other's distinct talents. Under my official leadership, Heritage Home Supply continued to thrive. With no more uncertainty about my position, I invested fully in our expansion into custom millwork manufacturing. The new division doubled our profits within 18 months. I implemented an employee stock ownership program, ensuring that the people who helped build the business would share in its success. No one who contributed to the company's growth would be undervalued on my watch. 5 years after the confrontation that changed everything, Heritage Home Supply had grown into a $40 million business with 120 employees across 6 locations. We had become the premier supplier for historical restoration projects nationwide, with a reputation for authenticity and expertise that competitors couldn't match. To mark this milestone, I hosted a company celebration at our original store location, now transformed into a showroom and educational center for restoration techniques. My family attended, but in a new capacity as guests rather than owners. As I stood addressing the gathered employees, customers, and suppliers who had become like extended family, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me for so long. 5 years ago, I learned a difficult but invaluable lesson. I told the crowd. I learned that building something meaningful requires not just hard work and vision, but also the courage to stand up for your worth. Every person in this room contributes something unique and valuable to our success, and under my leadership, those contributions will always be recognized and rewarded. I looked at my parents, who nodded in acknowledgement of how far we had come. Our relationship would never return to what it had been before, but we had found a new understanding based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. Ella stood nearby with Thomas and the twins, now 11 years old. She had found her own path back to fulfillment in her legal career, without the burden of trying to fill a role that was never right for her. The 10% of the company she still owned provided a nice supplement to her income, but more importantly, she had gained a genuine appreciation for what I had built. As the celebration continued around me, I took a moment to reflect on the journey. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead forced me to recognize my own value and fight for what I deserved. In standing up for myself, I had not only secured legal ownership of the company I built, but also discovered a strength I might never have known otherwise. The business was truly mine now in every sense. But more importantly, so was my future, shaped by my choices, secured by my courage, and built on the foundation of knowing my true worth. The painful experience had taught me that sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't given to you. They're claimed by having the courage to stand up and say, "This is what I've earned. This is what I deserve. And I won't settle for less." Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when others undervalued your contributions? The lesson I learned was that sometimes we need to be our own strongest advocates. Comment below with your experiences fighting for what you deserve, whether in business, family, or other relationships. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to recognize their own worth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to claim what you've earned in your own life.